Things are quiet now. But you won't believe how quickly the world came apart. Lights in the sky. Fires. The endless cold. Those who've survived have been brought to their knees. On their knees, they'll pray they make it through winter. When I was a doctor, I heard those same prayers. People hoping against hope. I couldn't do anything for them then. I'm not sure I can help them now, but I need to try. I know you're out there somewhere, fighting to survive for another day in a world that's forgotten us. Whatever happens, whatever you do, don't give up. Remember who we were. Don't let this new world break you. And I will see you again.
Welcome to On the Red Carpet, the premier, I guess you can say, podcast for developers. This is where we get an opportunity to talk to developers about their individual games and put a focus on it and pretty much make it seem like we are putting their game in the spotlight and on the red carpet. Today, we have with us Raphael Van Lierop. Is that correct?
Pretty close, yeah, Van Lierop. Yep.
Okay, Van Lierop. And he is the main developer from Hinterland Games, who has been working on the spectacular game that we got, Xbox gamers, from the preview program, The Long Dark. Raphael, if you can explain to everyone how you guys came up with the concept and the idea for The Long Dark and what inspired you to go in this direction with a survival game.
Sure. Well, Len, first of all, thanks a lot for having me on your podcast. It's always really exciting to talk to our fans and our community, and we don't actually often focus specifically on Xbox players, right, although they're a big part of our community as well. So it's really nice to be able to speak specifically to that audience.
Right.
In terms of the concept and the inspirations for the game, I guess I'd been thinking about. I should back up a little bit. So I've been making games for about 15 years, and I'd worked mostly in what we call AAA development. So for in large scale developers with big budgets and whatnot. And I'd often thought about I've been a fan of post-apocalyptic fiction in games and movies and whatnot for a really, really long time. And I've also been a fan of wilderness survival. And I felt like for me anyways that there wasn't really a notion of a pure survival game. We had a lot of survival horror kinds of games and a lot of zombie survival games, but nothing that really focused on being in nature and what that might feel like to be lost in the wilderness essentially. And there's lots of stories, there's a lot of literature and movies and whatnot that kind of talk about that, what that feels like, especially someone from modern civilization crash landing in the middle of the wilderness and having to kind of reconnect to some of their primal skills and having to face the fears and the challenges of being in this kind of environment. And I've just always found it really fascinating. The studio is based on Vancouver Island, so we're kind of surrounded by wilderness all around us. And so it's definitely something that, having moved here from the city, was really kind of in the forefront of my mind. But I guess for a while I've been thinking about whether there was a way to make survival the center of a gameplay experience as opposed to just, kind of a modifier on core action gameplay, which is generally what the zombie survival genre is. They're really mostly just shooters, but they just happen to be in sort of have zombies as their main enemies. And zombies kind of introduce their own, it's its own genre almost. So there's already a whole bunch of stuff that comes along with that. As soon as you put zombies in a game, there's expectations that come from that. And I had been playing, I was working at Ubisoft actually in Far Cry 3, so I was already working on a project, that had, a big emphasis on the outdoors. And I was playing a lot of Fallout 3, and I've always been a big fan of Fallout. Fallout 3 was, I think probably the game that I put the most time into probably over the last 10 years. I just really got sucked into that game. And I realized, when the game first came out, there was a fairly low level cap. And, once you hit that level cap, you wouldn't get any more XP, you wouldn't get any more perks or anything. And I found it interesting that, I had maxed out my level cap. The DLC hadn't been released yet that was going to raise the level cap. And yet I still wanted to play every night. I still wanted to go in there. And I started asking myself, like, why is that? What is so compelling about this game, even though none of the progression, I'm not getting any rewards for anything. And really, I just realized that that fantasy of wandering through an abandoned environment and being able to see things on the horizon, like a destroyed building or a cool looking shape of some kind or a piece of landmark that would draw me forward, and then the desire to explore that and to go into those abandoned places and see what I could find for myself. That's really what drove the whole experience for me. And I asked myself, could you make a game that was only about that? Take away all the other stuff. Take away the combat, which frankly in Fallout 3 was kind of more of a pain than anything else, and just try to really bring it down to its most basic elements. And that's kind of what got me thinking about what, the game that became The Long Dark, trying to put it in a wilderness environment, adding a sense of kind of like that urban exploration that you get out of Fallout, which is why, our game is in the wilderness, but there are, like abandoned town sites and cabins and things like that for you to explore. So it still kind of scratches that itch a little bit. And then, but really de-emphasize combat. So, we have wolf encounters and bears and stuff, but it's not traditional combat. You're not running around in the game with a gun in your hand. And I really just try to bring the mechanics down to the pure survival experience. So having to worry about how hungry you are, how tired you are, how thirsty you are, and how cold you are in our setting because it's in this winter. And that was the starting point. So we never, nowadays you look at, the survival genre, and it's kind of become a genre now. There's a lot of sort of rules and tropes that have become established from games like DayZ and Rust, and hopefully our game as well. But when we started working on The Long Dark, none of that stuff really existed, and we weren't looking at our game in terms of what other games were doing and then try to put our own slant on it. We just said, this is an experience that we feel excited about. How can we, create these strong emotions in our player through mechanics and aesthetics? So can we make a player feel really vulnerable? Can we make a player feel really alone? What does it feel like to be really alone, be the only person left in this huge environment? What does it feel like to realize that, in the face of Mother Nature, you're just this tiny thing that has no real power, And I think we really, in a lot of ways, were reacting to, certainly games that I'd worked on in the past. Like, I worked on a game called Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine, which was this sort of crazy over-the-top console action game. It was probably the most violent game ever made.
Right.
And that, like a lot of, sci-fi shooters, was all about the power fantasy of, having huge power armor and crazy weapons and just slaughtering like tons of aliens and whatnot. Standard stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's an experience that sort of mainstream games have been delivering for many, many years, and they do it really well, but it's kind of not that interesting anymore.
Right.
For me, I wanted to sort of explore the idea of going the opposite direction, which was not a power fantasy, but a vulnerability fantasy. So can we put you in a place where you aren't powerful and you don't have great weapons and equipment, and you just have, your choices, the things that are the information that the world has given you and how you're choosing to react to that. And, the choice that you make right now might be the difference between your life and your death, and you may not realize it yet, right? And so those kinds of things for me were really, really interesting, almost more like philosophical ideas to explore. And honestly, Len, when we started this project, I think we really approached it from the standpoint of wanting to create this emotional artistic experience with this beautiful art style. And of course we hoped that, people would like it, but I don't think I had any expectations that, it would necessarily be that successful. I just thought this is a game that I feel passionate about. You know, I'm striking off as an independent. I want to work on games that I feel excited about that are more true to my own kind of creative values. So as long as we can keep the lights on in the studio and pay people fairly, it's okay, right?
Right, right.
And it was awesome to be able to approach it from that standpoint, which was so different from the other games that I'd worked on in the past, which were really driven by, having these huge budgets and needing to sell a certain number of copies to cover the costs. And then afterwards to be able to have done that and then realize, that there are a lot of people that want to play a game like our game, and to have had a lot of success on Steam and now to have had success on Xbox has really been just an amazing experience for the team. And what a wonderful validation for, taking risks and trying to do something different. Right?
Yeah, I absolutely. I guess you could say exactly like what you said. The survival genre has really grown up, become excuse me, and has become a genre of its own. I mean, back in the day, when we thought of survival, it's exactly like you said. You think about zombies. You think about trying to survive in a world where everything is dark. You're limited on bullets and things like that. But then you look at games like The Long Dark. You look at games like Soulless Project. You look at games like Ark. These games have started to put an emphasis on, survival with, minimal weapons, not that many type of encounters, more worried about how do you survive the environment as a human being. Just being in this world, people don't realize how important the environment can play a role on a character. We go through everyday life just thinking, okay, I'm going to eat something today. I'm going to drink something today. But really, what is it like to not be able to do those things, as naturally and as consistently as we would like to? So it's really, really crazy that you built this game this way. And what makes it even tougher is you did it in winter. So, having that in winter plays a role in itself in the wilderness with bears and wolves. And, I just love the concept of it completely.
Yeah, I mean, winter is definitely one of the things that we focused on early on because we thought it would, as you said, it would create some opportunities to explore some really interesting, like extreme environments and sort of conditions. But it also allows us to be different from other games that are in the same space. Right. For us, it's the first part of what we hope to do in the long term, which is we would like to, we have the sandbox right now. It's in winter. We have story mode that we're working on. You're hoping to launch in the spring. That's going to tell the first part of the story. We're sort of approaching it as on a seasons model. So we want to do, multiple episodes in our first season, which is all going to be happening in winter. And then if we're successful with it, we want to continue doing it. So we want to push it into spring and change the mechanics, change the world, and then long term, if we can, and if our fans, continue to support what we're doing, we want to be able to do like a full year of the story of the Long Dark. So what happened in this world once this event took place? What was the first year of these characters' lives really like? How did the world change? What were the kinds of things that they had to experience? And, it's a different take on the apocalyptic genre because for us, it's not like 200 years in the future and humanity's already dying. It's tomorrow, and it's a situation that, in our case, we can recover from. We just can't recover from it right away. Right. And what's the future going to be like for civilization? What are we going to become longer term when we manage to work our way out of this situation that we found ourselves in? So there's a lot of things we'd like to do with story. Right now, all you see is sort of the surface of what we've made, and we're really invested in building up the world in a lot more detail than what you see. I mean, we've intentionally left out almost all the story content that you would expect there to be. We've left it out of the game on purpose. So even to the extent where we've been really careful almost to keep the world in some ways almost generic, like the things you find in the world don't really have labels on them. They don't have really kind of colorful names on them. They don't really give you a strong sense of what the world is that you're exploring, because we're holding on to that for story mode where you're going to experience almost like you're going to experience the game for the first time. Even though you might have been playing it for a long time, it's going to feel fresh and new because it's going to have this new layer of kind of fiction that we've revealed to you. So I'm very, very curious to see how players kind of respond to it, because it's going to be like something that's familiar to them, but also different and fresh. So it's quite exciting. And one thing I just wanted to riff on real quick with you is what you're saying about survival things. One of the things that I've found interesting is noticing now in it kind of has gone full circle. So you were talking about, how survival used to be, zombie survival,
Right.
and now we've got games like ours and Ark and some of these other games that are really focused purely on survival. And now I see it going back full circle where you've got big AAA productions like the latest Tomb Raider game has endurance mode, which basically adds survival mechanics to Tomb Raider.
Right. Right.
You've got Fallout 4 just announced they're going to do DLC with a survival mode that has very, very similar mechanics to us, like including how the rest system works and how you're tracking food and fatigue and water and everything just like in our game. Like, so it's almost like all the ideas that are in this survival genre that's kind of grown up over just the last few years.
Yeah.
Now those ideas are feeding back into the mainstream games as well. So it's kind of interesting to see how those ideas kind of flow between the indie game space and the AAA space, and how that kind of ecosystem continues to feed itself.
Right. It's funny because most of the time these type of games usually would be PC centric.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really get these type of games on consoles. I think developers and publishers always try to play it safe. And I say this all the time to any developers. The great thing about indie games, more than anything, some people tend to gloss over indie games because it doesn't have a high production value, or graphically it's not as impressive as the big AAA games. But the indie titles to me are the most unique and most original titles that you'll ever play, And what's great about those type of games is that you guys always come up with unique ideas. You always come up with things that are kind of a little bit out of the box. And it's funny that you talk about the environment, because I just had a whole bunch of fans ask me today, will we get new places to go, new stages and things like that? And I just want to just highlight something that you said. The fact that you said that not only did you guys hold back the story mode, but there's some possibility that you can do it in seasons where you may introduce spring. That's crazy, because I don't think anybody thought about that. I think everybody just always thought, okay, it's a winter setting, this is the way it's going to be, not realizing that it's in preview and that there is the possibility of new environments and new reasons to why these environments may play a role on you. I could imagine summer where everything is hot, and it's so hot that you're just thirsty all the time. Everything is dry, brush fires, you're in the woods. There's a lot of things that play factors into that, and I think that's really important and really different, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I think we always had that in mind from the very, very beginning, and we also knew that we wouldn't be able to do it all at once, right? And so I think partly our view on the world and the story and how we're making the game has always been to take it kind of one piece at a time. And that's why I talk about it as though, we think about seasons, narratively speaking, like a television series that has multiple seasons, but also seasons in the world that change the way the world is and change the mechanics. And that, in a lot of ways, I think about what we're trying to do as being like what a AAA game does, but they do it all at once. And we're just doing it piece by piece. And we're funding it ourselves as we go based on our players hopefully liking what we're doing and being willing to pay for it. And, they're funding our future development as well as we continue working on this. And that's what's so exciting about, things like being on Steam or in game preview, is that we do get to take feedback from the community. We get to share with them kind of our ideas of how we want to evolve the game. And hopefully they get invested in this so that they're going to be our customers and our community moving forward as well. And yeah, I mean, really the ambitions that we have are not at all limited by anything except just resources, right? So as long as we keep selling the game, as long as people still keep, continue to be happy with it, then we'd like to really build this out. And, in a few years from now, maybe we'll look back on this and be able to have this conversation about the long dark, like year one, where we get to play the whole survival sandbox is like multi-season, and the storyline is followed through from like the first episode all the way through, and you've got huge investment hopefully in the characters and the storytelling and your own sandbox experience as well, which is another thing that I think has been really exciting for us, is to see that a mode of the game which we released almost more just to get feedback from the community. We didn't plan on having the sandbox be kind of its own experience. It was really just a case of putting out something to the community that we could use for getting playtesting feedback, but always planning on like launching the full game with story and then kind of collapsing the sandbox experience back into the main story game so that there wouldn't be two separate modes. And what we've realized is that we have all these players who really love the sandbox and they just want to keep playing around in the sandbox. Mm-hmm. They want to have story mode as well, but they want to have that freeform sandbox experience that's much more about kind of their own story and their own experience as opposed to necessarily playing a specific character that we've created for them. So it's exciting for us to be able to see that we've got this growing audience that has a lot of different tastes and that we're able to deliver to many different people a different kind of experience that everybody, that sort of scratches a different itch for different players. And I think it's kind of exceeded anything that we had hoped when we started, in terms of what we've been able to build and how much of a community we have. It kind of blows us away every day.
Now, in any survival game, there's a crafting system. Have you guys thought of, implementing something in a way where you're able to find these different things in the environment and build other, I guess you could say, more complicated things to help you survive better, whether it be something like grappling to climb or to move around through the environment, or maybe even weapon-wise to protect yourself against, more powerful creatures in the world like bears or packs of wolves, besides just maybe an axe or just a rifle for long distance.
Well, we have some crafting in the game right now. Mm-hmm. We haven't, it's never really been a focus mm-hmm. for us. Some survival games are really crafting games with a certain kind of layer on top of them. Right. And our game is really an exploration game with survival mechanics, so the whole intention is for you to go through the world and find things. Right. And explore new locations and have that rush, that feeling of like being lost and being in a place for the first time and all the excitement that brings and the hopefulness that brings that you might find, things that can help you survive. So we've got crafting is obviously part of that. You find resources and raw materials. You can break down things that you find. So if you've got extra coats or extra tools, you can break them down into sort of raw materials that you can then reconstitute into new things. Mm-hmm. We've kept it so far, all the things that you can make are all quite functional, mostly because a lot of our pre-placed items, like if you can imagine the early part of the game is really mostly about, and I mean sort of days 10 to 15 or 30 or however many days it is, depending on what experience mode you're playing, right, might really be more about just going through the environment and kind of harvesting the things that are already there. So you find a hatchet, you find a rifle, you find food, you find clothing. But at some point, because of the way the condition systems work on gear items and everything, those things decay. They wear out from use or from the environment, from wear and tear, from getting attacked by animals, like whatever the situation is. We have this, everything is kind of always wearing out as you're using it and moving through the world with it. So at some point, if you survive for a really long time, you're going to use up all the things that have been pre-placed in the world for you. And now you have to learn how to survive using your own skills. Mm-hmm. And that's where the second phase comes in, which is now you need to harvest the material that's in the world and learn how to take advantage of it. So now you have to find saplings that you can use to make bows and arrows out of. You need to find the raw materials and then the tools that you need to actually forge arrowheads and improvise knives and hatchets and clothes even. So now you're harvesting wolves and deer and bears and stuff for their skins and their furs so that you can make clothes to replace the man-made clothes that you had that have worn out, right? So the first phase of kind of crafting for us has been to give the player the opportunity to replace the man-made items that they found in the world originally that were left behind to now be able to make their own. And so now they're more self-sufficient. We've always avoided the idea of, a lot of survival games have what I consider to be kind of like quite unrealistic crafting situations, like building a house or a fortress or something, right? Out of like platforms that you've built out of like a tree that you've cut down. It all happens in like 5 minutes. You cut a tree down, and you make a platform, then you build some big palisade and tower and stuff that probably feels fun in those games, but doesn't feel right in our world and in our game. Mm-hmm. So we've really avoided doing that, but we know that our community is looking for the opportunity to, right now you can break a lot of things down. Like you can go into a cabin and let's say you need wood, so you can take a table or a chair or whatever, and you can break down pieces into wood that you can use for fire or whatever. everything you find in the world, almost everything, whether it's the carpets on the floor or the curtains on the walls, you can tear up and use the cloth for like repairing your clothes or making bandages or whatever. There's a lot of just sort of destructibility or harvesting that can happen with the stuff that's already in the game, but there's not a lot of creativity, right? The only real creativity I think that exists, other than whatever the player kind of brings to the table themselves with their own imagination, is that you can customize the way your gear is kind of placed and laid out. So you might have a house in the game or a location that's kind of your safe house or your favorite place to hang out, or maybe you have more than one. And whenever you gather supplies, you go back to that place and you place your items. So it used to be months ago that if you had a bunch of gear, and let's say you picked the Trapper's Cabin or the Quonset or the farmhouse in Pleasant Valley that are your favorite places, and we kind of built those environments specifically so that they would be like sort of your hero locations, like safe house places that you would want to go back to. Before, you used to have to just drop stuff on the ground, and so you'd see these screenshots of people that would have 50 liters of water and whatever 20 pack cans of beans and like tons of stuff, and it would all be scattered on the floor like around their safe house, and they were happy with that. But we thought, well, that's kind of because it's not really. It seems a little bit ghetto to just like drop. So then we thought, well, let's give the player the ability to kind of just place things in a specific way. And it seems like a small thing, but what it ended up doing is all the people that want to organize their stuff now have the ability to do that. So now you have these screenshots of people that have like tons of gear that they've placed in all these perfect like rows and on shelves and like, on tables, and all the people with OCD like line up all their stuff perfectly. And, it's like this small expression of kind of creativity that they find in the game. And we kind of recognize from that our players, not to the extent of like a Minecraft where you can take the world down and then build the world again in your own way. But I think there is a place in our game for crafting that is more of a creative process than just a destructive process. And I think that's something that we would like to do in the future. And maybe it's partly around sort of decorations that you can make for your safe house. Somewhat should be maybe furniture items and things like that. And then long term, I don't know. I would like to think that maybe farther in the future of the game, once we've done a lot of other work that we need to get done, maybe we do open the door, maybe it's in the summer season or something like that of the game, where we put you in a place in the world for story reasons or whatever, where there isn't a lot of shelter, or you need to, I'm just making stuff up right now, right? But I'm just saying maybe you need to build your shelter. Maybe you need to build a cabin, but you actually have to do it the way that you would do it in our game, which is you need to take the time to do it. You need to make the tools. You need to gather the wood. You need to prepare the wood for it to be used. You need to be able to build it, in a more, I say realistic, even though it's not, I don't really mean realistic. I just mean in a way that doesn't feel magical, right? Like a lot of these other games do. And if that was something our community really wanted, and we felt like it was something that we as the development team could get really excited about, and it was going to create some really cool gameplay opportunities for our players, we would be open to doing that. It's not something that would add anything to the game right now. And there's so many other things that, story mode is a huge undertaking for us. It's a lot of work, and we want to make it really, really great. And it's something that none of the other survival games are doing, right? Every other survival game is like a multiplayer. Even the ones that are single player are just essentially like very straightforward with no story content. We're actually putting like a story layer on top of our game with characters and like, pretty detailed plot, and just really trying to bring you into a world with a really interesting background and like with great drama and all kinds of things that are happening that you really care about. And that's a big thing for a small team to do, right? So we really know a lot of our players have sort of bought into the game because that's what they want. They want that narrative-driven survival experience. They don't, a lot of our players love the sandbox, and we're grateful for that. And certainly it's driven a lot of the awareness and the success of the game. But certainly our long-term plan has always been to build out the Long Dark as, like an intellectual property. So we have like a world that we've made, and we have characters, and we want to see those storylines carry through to the completion. And it's maybe a little bit more like The Walking Dead in that sense, not the episodic games, but I mean more the fiction of The Walking Dead, where there's this world and an event has happened, and now there's a bunch of survivors, and you want to know what's happening to those people and what is their particular story. And, that's what we're focused on right now. Once we get that underway and we've been successful with that, we really see, frankly, I see not no end to the Long Dark, but I definitely think there's lots of things we could do with it. There's tons of ways we could expand the sandbox. There's tons of ways we could continue to expand the story, and we just want the opportunity to do that. We hope that our players continue to like what we're doing. We hope to keep growing our community. We feel like our approach is really to try to put a tremendous amount of value and quality into a game that is pretty affordable, really, for what you get.
Right.
And that's just our focus. And we hope that our fans will continue to support us, and that they'll share the word with their friends. And that, all we really want to do, we're not trying to be rich. We just want to make great stuff, right? Like, that's all we really care about. And pretty much every dollar we make goes right back into the game. Like, that's the only reason why we're here. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of off track, but it's important to me for people to know that what motivates us. And really what motivates us is most of the team has come from that same AAA background where we all worked on things that felt really commercial, right? Mm-hmm. Like they were just products.
Yeah.
And this is not a product for us. This is like a life sort of dedication. This is something that we really believe in and we're really serious about. And if we can't make it great, we don't want to do it, right? So it's something that we take very seriously.
Right. Before we get out of here, let's talk about your team for a bit. Usually, sure, when you have any developers, they usually have small teams. How large is your team? And, what is everybody's role within the game?
Sure. So we actually have about almost 20 full-time people now working on the game.
Wow.
Yeah, so we're not that small anymore. Probably for the first 18 months or more of the project, there were only 5 or 6 of us. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the growth has come in over the last probably almost year, where we've really been sort of building up the team for story mode. There's a lot of content we need to make. And even Sandbox is a huge amount of work for us to continue building and expanding. So we need a lot of developers. We have, the team is broken up in the traditional lines. We've got, 4 programmers. We have only one other, myself and one other designer. We've got a bunch of artists working on the game, whether they're environment artists, we have a UI artist. We've got a couple animators. We've got actually a pretty large community team, because so much of what we do is community engagement, right? Is keeping our community, interested and try to let them know what's going on without giving away too much, too many spoilers, and just responding to their feedback and all that kind of stuff. So we actually have a team of 3 full-time community people that just focus on that. And then, some admin type people and whatnot to help out. But we're pretty light. We don't really have any management per se. It's all just like development. I think I'm probably the only person on the team who kind of has a bit of a management role, in the sense that I'm doing creative direction and kind of running the studio and the project at the same time. But the reason I'm able to do that is because the team is so experienced. So most of the people that are working on the game have been in the industry for 10 or 15 years. So it's the only way that we could make a game like this with a team that size. Mm-hmm. And yeah, we're headquartered on Vancouver Island. We have a little studio here, and about half the team is actually located here and working in the studio here, and about half the team is distributed. So some of them are in Vancouver. We've got a couple guys in Edmonton, and 3 people in the States. And we work, in a highly collaborative environment. We've got a bunch of tools that we use to kind of stay in touch with each other. But yeah, I mean, it's I think we're probably pretty typical as far as like independent developers go. We're not, at the garage stage anymore. Like, we're past that point.
Right.
And we're in full production on our story mode. So we do have a bigger team than we used to. Mm-hmm. And we're probably as big as where we're going to get. And, we're just focused on, like I said, producing the best quality stuff we can.
Well, we at least know why you guys chose the winter environment for your game.
Yeah. I think we know something about winter here.
Yeah, I would think so. So, listening to you and, talking about the game and the direction and everything just sounds so intriguing. But I wonder, and this is just my own personal idea, have you ever thought about, let's say, because I know the whole point of the game is to be the only person kind of in the world, or believing you're the only person in the world, trying to discover what happened and why this is, all happening and things like that. But I think something that would be really cool was if you guys were to implement like a random NPC that came into the environment and was able to share with you a resource that you naturally don't have,
Mm-hmm.
but they're there for a limited time,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And I think that'd be really cool, because then it kind of gives you the excitement of, let me go explore to see if I can find somebody in the area if they're there on that particular day at that
Mm-hmm.
particular time. If not, then they're not there. But I think it gives the gamer the intrigue to constantly want to be on to see what's happening or what's going on here, there, and things like that, and constantly exploring. I mean, obviously, like you said, they're going to be exploring regardless, because their resources and their materials deteriorate over time. So you're going to have to constantly go out to get new resources, or eventually use the environment to build your own. But I just think adding a little hint of, maybe a random person to pop up. And what would be really cool is if you don't even know if that random person is a
Mm-hmm.
friendly or a foe.
Yeah, no,
You know?
you're reading our minds. Yeah, I mean, we're working on, we've been working on, so the sandbox obviously was built for, for you to, you're alone in it. And that's part of the whole
Right.
atmosphere that we've been trying to create, right? That sense of being alone. But we always knew that for story mode, we were going to need to add NPCs, right? And we've got sort of
Right.
systems built around NPCs that that also make sense in sandbox. And so we've been, planning and developing these NPCs to work in the sandbox as well. The only sort of open question right now for us is, do we also allow the opportunity for players to play the game the way it is right now, where they're by themselves, right? Because we do have a lot of players that just
Mm-hmm.
love that solo isolating experience, and they don't even want
Right.
the possibility of ever encountering another character in the world. So we're trying to
Right.
figure out, does that mean we have different sandbox sort of game modes where you have like an isolation mode where you're by yourself, and then another mode where you can meet people? Do we break it up in terms of the world? Like certain places in the world you might encounter people, and other places you don't. Like we haven't quite decided how we want to roll that out yet, but definitely I agree with you. It's never going to be a very populated world, but I think the possibility of walking down a stretch of broken highway or cresting the top of a hill and having been by yourself for the last 10 or 15 days, and then suddenly seeing there's a campfire down there and somebody's sitting next to it, or you see a figure walking through a blizzard towards you, and having that moment of
Right.
thinking, are they friend or foe? Like, are they,
Right.
what's going to happen here? Like, should I just hide or run? Should I try to take them out before they get close? Should I, risk the chance that maybe they want to share information and maybe even goods? Like, those are the kinds of decisions that I think we've always felt like were really core to the whole experience of the Long Dark. And even
Mm-hmm.
going back to our Kickstarter campaign originally, like that was always a big focus of what we were going to do, is that moment. For me, it was always a moment, like the moment that you read about in stories about survival, or that you have seen in movies about survival, where there's two people that are in a bad place, a bad situation, and neither of them knows whether they can trust the other person. And but maybe trusting the person is the thing that's going to save you, or maybe trusting the person is the thing that's going to kill
Right.
you, right? So like that whole ambiguity about it is part of what makes sort of the survival and idea and the whole kind of post-disaster concept feel really, really interesting. So it's definitely something that we've thought a lot about, and I think you're absolutely right. And I know that a lot of our players are really waiting for that. And I think
Mm-hmm.
we're just really also mindful of how much that changes the game, the way it feels when you're not totally alone anymore. And so
Mm-hmm.
we're just trying to figure out the best way to navigate that for our players, because there are a lot of people who do, strangely enough, people that play the game almost more like a meditation. They play pilgrim mode, and it's not challenging necessarily. The wildlife pretty much leaves you alone, and they just play it kind of as a meditation. Like they just want to walk through the woods and listen to the wind and look at the sunrise, and you know what I mean? Like listen to the birds singing, whatever, see wildlife
Right.
running away from them instead of coming after them. And they just really, like, some people, we get tons of emails and notes from people in social media that are like, I just play your game to relax at the end of the day, right? And then we have the opposite people
Right.
who play Stalker and they, mode, and they go for the hardcore survival experience, and they play it, almost more like because they're looking for excitement. They want to have a challenge and they want to
Right.
feel like they're almost, I don't know, it's like life affirming to risk your life in the game, like not giving up and trying to survive one more day is just like, I don't know, it's just like the fight to survive, somehow gives them a reason to live. So it's just exciting to see how the one game can be so many different things to so many different people.
Right. Man, this game sounds so super awesome, and I'm like super excited to get my hands on the full version of this game. So I want to thank you for coming on the show. We're coming up on our last question. To all the fans out there listening, if you guys have not tried this game out on the preview program, try it out, because it is, first of all, I love the aesthetic that you guys use graphically. Like the choice in the graphics for the game is I love it, because to me it feels right. You have some people that try to go ultra realistic. You have some people that try to go maybe a little too old school with the pixelated graphics. But I think when you guys fall on a line between cell shading and I don't know really what to call it, but that's the kind of feel that I get from it, and I really really like that feel that you guys put into the game. But before we head out, what I would like to ask is something that I ask all developers that come on the show that deal with the Idea Xbox program. How has your experience been with the Idea Xbox program? And because you're my first developer that's been in the preview program, how has that been able to help you continue the development of the Long Dark?
It's been, Idea Xbox has been great. We've got really awesome people that we work with over there that have been really, really supportive about what we're doing with the game. Game preview has been really an exciting thing for us. I don't know if you know or if your listeners know, but we actually launched game preview with Microsoft. So
Yes,
so that
I
was
do remember that.
actually
Yeah.
the reason why we ended up, bringing the game to Xbox. We'd been talking, Microsoft had approached us last year before Christmas. Their ID, business development people that look for projects that they think look like they would be good for the platform. And they approached us and asked us about whether we wanted to come to the platform. And, we, at that point, just like today, our game grew up on Steam, and we've really, like, our development process is super agile because of the tools and the way that we're able to update the game through Steam, which is very, very seamless. And having worked in console development before, I always associate console development with not having that much flexibility because it's a closed platform and you have to work through, used to be you have to work through these really, really heavy duty certification programs. And it's just like working with we're a small studio of 20 people and we're going to work with Microsoft that's like 30,000 employees. Like, it's just the cultures don't match, right? So at first I was really not comfortable with the idea. It felt like, the opposite of the kind of partner that we should be working with. And then as I got to know them better and I got to know more about what we're doing, and just the relationship evolved over a few months. And then they came to us one day and they said, look, you guys are doing really great on early access. We want to roll out a program on Xbox that's like that for consoles. And it's, at that point it wasn't called Game Preview, it had a different name, and they were just starting work on it. And then, and they said, we want you guys to be one of the first games on this platform. And at that point I was like, okay, now you're talking about something that I can get behind, because it's innovative and it's different. And as soon as you say, like, you're going to be the first to do it, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Like, that's what I want to do.
Right.
So we, right. And it was funny because even the guys within ID at Xbox who were really pushing this program, they had a tremendous amount of work inside Microsoft trying to convince people like that this was something that should be done, because it's totally not the way that Microsoft works, and it's not how you make games on Xbox. And this whole idea of like having a game that's not finished, that's available, and you can pay for it, and there's a community around it that can give feedback on the game, like it's never existed on a console before. So there's this whole like thing that the guys that work at Audi at Xbox had to do to kind of try to get support internally at Microsoft for it. And part of that was, of course, lining up games that looked interesting. And then so they're doing their thing. And then meanwhile, we didn't have any code up and running on Xbox at all. We're working on Unity. So it was we knew it was a possibility, but we hadn't done it. We didn't know anyone who had done any games on Unity on Xbox One yet. So it was, again, fairly a big question mark as to how that was going to go. And as the process continued, things were going well. And then, we were having conversations with them about when they were going to announce game preview. And they said, well, we're thinking about announcing it at E3. But we won't launch the program until probably August of last year. And we said, well, if you're going to announce it at E3, then why not launch it at E3? And they said, well, we can't launch it if there's no games ready to launch. And we said, well, what if we're ready to launch? Would you do it if we were ready? And they said, well, I don't know. Are you going to be ready? And we said, well, I don't know. Are you guys going to be ready? So this is kind of thing where neither of us was really sure if the other party was going to be ready, but we both thought, man, it would be awesome if we could do it, because if you can announce it at E3 and then right away you can actually jump into the program if you're a player, that's much better than saying, yeah, we're going to do this thing and it's going to happen in 2 months, So
right.
My team totally pulled out all the stops, and it's really a testament to how hard they worked and how good they are at their jobs. We took our game from nothing on Xbox to through their cert process in 26 days, which I think is the fastest it's ever been done. And we launched at E3. Microsoft got, the guys that I did Xbox got all their stuff done. They got all their support. They got all their back-end stuff. They got the store updated. They did a huge amount of work on their side to get it up and running too. They announced game preview in the Microsoft press conference at E3. And that same day, we were available in the Xbox store for sale. And that was a crazy hustle. And it was an awesome moment for us as a small studio to be sitting in the stadium, during this press conference and seeing our game logo up on the huge screen. And we were at E3, we demoed in the Microsoft booth, we had people come by to play the game. And so it was awesome as kind of a milestone of our development, right? To be able to come to the console. And, the support from the community has been awesome. It's definitely been a different process for us because, Xbox doesn't have the same kind of community forum sort of culture that Steam does, right? So we kind of have to go out and remind our Xbox players, hey guys, come on over and hang out with us in the forums and tell us what you think, so we can incorporate your feedback into the game. And a lot of them love it, but I think a lot of them don't really understand that process yet because it's not something that's been really part of console gaming before. So it's like an educational process. We're working with Microsoft, we're working with our players, and they're slowly learning about it. And the pickup of the game has been really solid. We're regularly in the top 20 or 40 games on the Xbox store in terms of sort of sales and great review scores, user reviews already. And we treat the game is the same on both platforms for us. It's not like Xbox is a secondary platform. It's just we're making one game. It just happens to be on a bunch of different platforms, and Xbox is one of them. And it's been super exciting for us to be able to see our Xbox players coming into our forums and hanging out with Steam players, PC players, and they're the same, right? It's sort of like the console, the Xbox guys open the door and there's a party happening and they're not sure if they should walk in or not, And the PC guys are hey, it's Xbox guys, come on over and hang out with us. And this is big love fest about The Long Dark, and it's none of that years ago when I was working on console games, it was PC gamers and console gamers don't ever mix. And there was this whole PC Master Race thing. And then console gamers, console games are awesome and PC games are dying. And it's like oil and water. It's always been like that. And it's been cool for us to look at it as it's just one community. And they're united over their love of the game and their desire to share feedback. And, they find things that they don't like that they want to tell us about. And they find things that they love that they want to tell us about. And so it's been fun to, to see that happening. And so, yeah, I would say generally the experience has been great. We've got really great people that we work with there. The certification team has been awesome. So we've been able to launch all our Xbox updates, all our major updates on Xbox at the same time as our Steam updates. So we keep them in sync. We don't have to delay. It's partly because that's our philosophy and partly because Microsoft has been a huge support of what we're doing, and they've worked with us to kind of streamline things and make sure that things can be as fast as possible. And we just hope that we just hope that our Xbox players continue to come out and, find us. We have a big community at hinterlandforums.com where all our players, or many of our players, show up, and we actually just refreshed them yesterday, so they're even more sort of easier to use now than they ever have been. And we just really want our Xbox players to come out and share their feedback and be part of the community that we're building and be part of the future that we're building.
Nice. That's nice. And I'm very, very glad to hear that things are working out so well for you guys. And man, I really enjoy the program. I really do. I mean, because you just get to see these games grow, you get these updates, you see the changes, you get excited about the changes, and you get to be a part of the development. As gamers, we always want to try to develop games, or we always want to try to have a say in the way a game goes. And I think in this instance, guys out there have an opportunity now to give their feedback, to give their opinions on the game. And the developers may take a liking to something that they say and implement it in the game. So I think it's important that people really take a good look at what Microsoft is bringing to the table with the ID and Xbox program, and what they're doing with preview program and all the games that they're bringing, including the first one to officially be a part of that program, The Long Dark. I want to thank you, man, for coming on the show and giving me an opportunity. I really, really appreciate it. And I hope that we get you back on the show once the game launch. Which, by the way, did you guys have a
We just said spring 2016. We kept it kind of vague. But yeah, it's going to be, I'd love to come back. So when story mode launches, I'd love to come back and talk more about how that's gone and what our plans are like for the future. And if your fans have any questions for us, tell them to feel free to reach out to us on social media. We're at Hinterland Games on Twitter. We're Into the Long Dark on Facebook. We're at Hinterland Forums. If they want to join our forum community, we're at hinterlandgames.com. If they want to just check out our website where we post all our updates and a bunch of editorial content about the game, et cetera, et cetera. So we're really accessible. We love to hear from our community. We want them to feel like part of what we're doing. And just really appreciate everybody in the Xbox community who's tried the game, whether they downloaded it on Game Preview for the free hour and decided they were going to wait till the game launches, or whether they dove in with us now and have been participating in this development and have been helping to ensure that we can still be independent and make something special. I just really, really appreciate all that they've done to help us out.
Well, I want to thank you again, Raphael, for coming on the show. I want to thank your team for working so hard on this game that you guys are bringing to Xbox. I wish you nothing but success.
Thank you so much. All right, we'll talk again soon.
All right, have a good one.